Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, good morning and welcome and good afternoon. Welcome to the launch of our Japan Energy Policy Review this morning in Paris this afternoon. We're very happy and honored to be joined by Mr. Shin Hosaka, the Commissioner at the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy at Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI. We will first hear from Dr. Fatih Birol, our Executive Director, and Dagmar Graczyk, our Senior Policy Analyst here, about the report's main findings. And we will then turn to Mr. Hosaka for his remarks. And after that, we will take a 2-minute break to collect questions, and we will have a Q&A session. This presentation, this media launch, will last 45 minutes. The report and the findings are now on our website, and this session is being live streamed. We now turn to Dr. Birol for the floor. Thank
you. Greetings from International Energy Headquarters in Paris to all the colleagues in Japan, in Tokyo, especially to Mr. Shin Hosaka, as well as other colleagues and friends around the world. The International Energy Agency reviews the energy policies of its member governments regularly. In general, they are every 5 to 6 years, and we call it the in-depth review of all the energy system, and makes recommendations for the government, and these recommendations are made public, as it is the case today. These reviews are carried out by several experts from different countries, and they come up together and make this report. And in this case today, I am very happy that we are releasing the energy policy review of Japan, one of the key member governments of the International Energy Agency. We had a big team to review Japanese energy policies, about 12 peers from different countries and governments, from Australia, Germany, Korea, Netherlands, New Zealand, Sweden, as well as the colleagues from the Nuclear Energy Agency and IEA. And the team was led by my former deputy, Ambassador Paul Simons from United States. Our team met with different ministries, businesses, agencies, all relevant stakeholders, but my special thanks go to our colleagues in METI, hosting my colleagues, guiding them, supporting them throughout the review. But as I said, the review was independent, objective, and made some recommendations for the betterment of the Japanese energy sector. So what I would like to do now is that I would like to give a bit of a general picture where we see the Japanese energy system is located in the current global context. Now, as it happens, dear colleagues, today is about 10 years after Fukushima. And when I look at what happened in Fukushima 10 years ago, the Great East Japan earthquake, I'm pleased to say that the Japanese energy sector recovered from the damage in the right way. When we look at the history of Japan and energy, there are many, many achievements. But if you ask me, who follows the Japan and the energy industry since years, Japan's leadership in energy efficiency is key and will never be forgotten what it has started. Another one, nowadays we are seeing Japanese leadership and achievements in terms of the hydrogen becoming a part of the energy equation. But here, I would like to note another major achievement. Despite the huge damage and the large-scale loss of nuclear immediately after Fukushima accident, the Japan avoided disruptions like major blackouts. This is a huge success story. This is a huge success story as a result of Japanese governments being nimble, moving very quickly, finding different ways to get electricity through energy efficiency, energy conversion, and through LNG and using all possible means, and there was no major blackout. So this is a big success, because as we all know, it was a major issue for Japan and for the world. I myself, in the February 2018, visited Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and I saw what a major excellent it was, and also witnessed the progress happening there despite the many challenges. So since then, I am also very happy to see that Japan made a lot of steps in the right direction in order to improve the nuclear safety standards and created an independent nuclear regulator, which is in place today and which is very important. When we again look at the last 10 years, I see that the regulatory reforms in the electricity markets have progressed. Retail electricity markets have been liberalized, and the companies have been unbundled. And I know that the similar steps are taken in the natural gas markets as well. Renewables, there was a major, and there is a major and generous support of by the Japanese government to renewables, and the investment increased substantially, especially solar, and it helped to diversify the power mix and reduce energy imports of Japan. As I said, in terms of energy efficiency, Japan was already a leader, a pioneer, and we have seen that in the last 10 years, the efficiency levels have improved also significantly. In terms of innovation, Japan is a country where the innovation is the word of innovation is written always in capital letters, and we are seeing once again the innovative power of the Japanese industry in many fronts, from the electric cars to especially to hydrogen, which I will come in a minute. And this is definitely a major move for the Japanese industry to have a right place at the right time in the international competition. Now, emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. We were very happy to hear the Prime Minister's call for carbon neutrality by 2050, setting this ambitious targets. This is very good. And we are also seeing that the CO2 emissions today in Japan are below pre-Fukushima times. It's a big achievement. But of course, reaching carbon neutrality by 2050 is a huge and ambitious task, and International Energy Agency is ready to support Japanese government to put the credible but also ambitious energy policies in place to reach these targets. Now, after this overview after Fukushima, let me tell you a few things about the world. Just 2 days ago, we gave the world rather a worrying news, the entire world. Because with the COVID crisis, global emissions started to decline, and many people thought that this will be the new normal. But we said as the IEA that if the governments do not take right measures with the economy rebounding, emissions will go back there where they were before the COVID. And when we look at the numbers that we have just published, unfortunately, IEA was right. As of December, with the global economy rebounding, December 2020, global emissions are higher than December 2019 global emissions. And I'm afraid that with the global economy rebounding, which is a good news, and the governments do not put right policies in place, we may well see 2021 emissions will be on the rise. This would mean that there is a big discrepancy between the ambitions of the governments and what is happening in the real life. Now, again, looking at globally, we are seeing a major momentum. Several countries around the world, including Japan, European Union countries, United Kingdom, China, Canada, Korea, they have now making pledges to reach 2050 in net zero. And this covers about 60% of global emissions. And I expect very soon United States government will join to this group. And another good news is that the many countries, in order to recover from the COVID crisis, they are putting on the table huge amount of economic recovery packages, and more and more countries are putting clean energy policies, incentives for those recovery packages. And of course, one important issue is the COP26 in Glasgow, organized by the UK government, and this is in November. I very much hope that this will be a meeting bring the world leaders together, like it was the case in Paris some 6 years ago. And the world has a roadmap altogether to reach our climate targets. Now, as International Energy Agency, we are supporting our governments and all the governments around the world in many ways this year. And I wanted to bring two of them to your attention. I mentioned to you that the many governments around the world come up with a net zero pledges, targets. And the IEA, we are undertaking a major study. What does it mean for the world as a whole if the emissions come to net zero by 2050? What does it mean for the oil industry? What does it mean for the coal industry? What does it mean for the car manufacturers to have a world net zero emissions by 2050? We are going to release this report on 18th of May, to put the world's roadmap to net zero, the first and the comprehensive report to provide a guidance for the governments before Glasgow meeting. And the second point I want to mention to you is International Energy Agency. Yes, Glasgow meeting is a very important, a critical meeting for all of us. But there is another meeting that we are organizing with the COP presidency on 31st of March. We are bringing all major players around the table to provide a basis for better international collaboration in Glasgow. Yesterday in Paris, I had a meeting with the COP president, Alok Sharma. We reviewed the participation list, and we are very happy that from US climate envoy, Mr. Kerry, to EU Vice President, Mr. Timmermans, Mr. Kajiyama from Japan, the METI minister, Chinese, Indian leaders, several government leaders, they will all come together and discuss how we can accelerate the international collaboration and to make sure that we have a serious and accountable framework coming from Glasgow. Now, putting targets are important, but I wanted to show you last two slides where we are today. With the current policies we have, even with the NDCs the governments have, global emissions do not go down at all. If we look at if the world needs to come to net zero in 2070, it's a huge undertaking. And when we look at the net zero pledges by Japan, EU, UK, New Zealand, it takes only a small piece of it. And if you even put China, you are not even 50% to reach that target. And there's a 50% here. I hope US government will come up soon to make a significant chunk of it. But still, there is a huge room there from the countries who have not made any pledges. And if we want to come to 2050 net zero, not 2070, then the challenge is much, much bigger, and which calls for a rapid and ambitious energy policies to put in place. This is a huge challenge, and as I said, we will explain on 18th of May, what does it mean in real life for the energy sector to come net zero in 2050. I would like to finish my thoughts by pointing out one, I believe, a critical issue for Japan and many countries in Europe, United States, China, and elsewhere, which is the role of nuclear energy in today's energy world. When we look at globally, nuclear energy is the second source of clean electricity today. It provides uninterrupted electricity service without providing emissions around the world. And if you look at the advanced economies, such as Japan, US, and Europe, nuclear is the #1 source of clean electricity. And it has been so in the last 3 decades. So therefore, when we think of the electricity security, when we think of the clean electricity to reach our climate targets, in my view, nuclear should have an integral part in the government, in the countries where governments and citizens are part of the solution. So with these global comments, I would like to turn back to Mr. Jet Muvat. And perhaps before Jet Muvat, I would like to turn myself to my colleague, Dagmar Grechik, who is in charge of this report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. Let's have a look at the specific findings of the Japan IDR review. Just to give you a brief picture, the energy mix of Japan is still dominated by fossil fuels, which account for 85% of the total, and 88% of all energy used in the country is imported. Industry and transport together account for almost 2/3 of total final consumption, and both are typically sectors that are hard to decarbonize. So this is not an easy starting point. Nonetheless, in October 2020, Japan announced a carbon neutrality target for 2050. Japan is to be applauded for this strong ambition, and we hope that this review and its recommendation will contribute to the energy transitions in Japan. For 2030, Japan is committed to reduce emissions by 26% compared to 2030, the earlier peak. Japan's new ambition is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero and to realize a carbon neutral, decarbonized society. With this ambition, Japan puts itself in the Champions League of countries that want to mitigate quickly. Achieving the 2050 aim will require Japan to substantially accelerate the deployment of low carbon technologies, address regulatory and institutional barriers, and further enhance competitive energy markets. The new ambition will also require to revisit the current targets for 2030 to see if emission reductions can be made larger and earlier. We therefore welcome the Green Growth Strategy of 2050 that was released in December 2020 and that calls for an ambitious expansion of renewables, a safe recovery of nuclear power, and the deployment of new technologies, including electricity generation from low carbon hydrogen and ammonia, safe advanced nuclear reactors, and carbon recycling. It will also be important to develop different scenarios to prepare for the possibility that certain low carbon technologies do not expand as quickly as hoped. The electricity sector is one of the obvious sectors to start decarbonizing. In 2019, current 19% of electricity generation was from renewables and 7% came from nuclear. Electricity generation is expected to remain stable to 2030. However, the fuel mix is become more balanced. In 2030, Japan expects to produce 44% of its electricity from non-fossil fuels. A key uncertainty for this is if nuclear will come back on stream as planned. There is a need to raise the zero emission power source ratio already by 2030 to avoid backloading efforts for the period to 2050. One challenge the Japanese power sector is facing is the lack of a unified transmission network, which makes it more challenging to integrate variable renewables. It is also important to note that as an island country, Japan has no international electricity connections. Due to historical reasons, Japan has 2 transmission networks operating at different frequencies, which are further fragmented into 10 regional grids. There is limited interconnection capacity between and within the different regions. This impacts the capacity to transfer electricity from the locations that are suitable for the installation of variable renewables to the large demand centers. The government plans to increase the interconnection capacity between the regions by 2.5 times from today to 2030, and also to increase transmission capacity within the different regions. This will also help to enhance the resilience of the electricity system. Japan has a very high level of power supply reliability, but in recent years, it has become more challenging to maintain a reliable supply when earthquakes and typhoons caused long and large-scale power outages. Let me use this opportunity to briefly talk about the importance of security of gas supply. as was demonstrated by the shortages of gas supply in the power sector in January 2021, when a cold snap hit the country. The gas shortage resulted in the purchase of spot cargoes at record high prices, even higher than those after Fukushima. Electricity market prices jumped by a factor of 10. However, the domestic gas market for the residential sector was much less affected, indicating that the gas sector might still be fragmented. The gas shortage came as a surprise to many market participants, as there is little transparency on gas stocks. Gas storage numbers are published with a delay of 3 months, so market participants may not be aware of the low levels of stocks when a cold snap hits. The IEA has undertaken extensive work to strengthen gas security in Japan, and we have highlighted the benefits of securing fuel switching opportunities and more frequent reporting of gas stocks, and perhaps even mandatory gas stocks, such as is already the case in a number of other IEA member countries. In a comparison among OECD countries, the effective carbon prices in Japan are relatively low, although they vary between users and fuels. The majority of unpriced emissions are emitted by the industry and the electricity sector, while the transport sector faces high effective CO2 prices. End-user prices in the residential and commercial sectors are high. In our view, Japan requires solid economic incentives to mitigate emissions, especially with a view to the new 2050 target. We therefore see scope for Japan to make better use of price signals to promote low carbon technologies in a cost-effective way. We welcome the Green Growth Strategy of 2020 that seems to be alluding to introduce more robust economic mechanisms by calling for regulatory reform, including market-based tools that could include credit, trading, carbon tax, and carbon border adjustment. The IEA stands ready to support Japan in this undertaking. But given that end-user prices are already partly very high in Japan, it will be important to carefully design such price signals to limit any negative impact on end-user prices. There are several examples globally that Japan could study to ensure that new price signals do not increase the overall tax burden, and also to consider options how revenues from enhanced price signals could be recycled to the population and to industry. With this, I'm now pleased to hand back to our Executive Director to share the key recommendation of this report.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Karacic. Just to finish our presentation, that we are very happy to see that the Japanese government is committed to push the clean energy transition by making use of all clean energy technologies to address some of the barriers in front of this transition, regulatory barriers, institutional barriers, and make the markets more competitive. In that respect, we have 4 major recommendations to Japanese government. Number 1, that it will be very good if the Japanese government come up with different strategies, energy strategies, scenarios, to reach its energy and climate goals by making use of all existing and the new innovative clean energy technologies, ranging from offshore wind to nuclear, from nuclear to hydrogen, ammonia, and carbon capture. Second, the making more use of the price signals will be necessary in order to encourage investments across the economy in efficient and low carbon technologies. Third, it is again critical to improve the electricity system operations in order to enhance security and allow a different diverse mix of generation sources. I think this is will be very, very important in order to have efficient electricity markets. Finally, as we have said before, and as my colleague Mrs. Grachik underlined, the advancing of electricity and gas market reforms is key. And here, Japanese government, we recommend, can consider making the Electricity and Gas Market Surveillance Commission a more independent regulator with its own executive and enforcement powers. Finally, let me reiterate that we are ready to support Japanese government in order to help them to accelerate its energy transition, boost the energy resilience, and hope to see a sustainable economic growth. With this, I am going to turn back to my colleague, Mr. Muwak.
Many thanks, Dr. Birol. I would like now to turn to Mr. Shin Hosaka, the Commissioner for the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy at Japan's Ministry for Economy, Trade and Industry. Mr. Hosaka, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. And thank you very much, and Dr. Birol and Dr. Dagmar for your valuable presentation. I'm Shin Hosaka, Commissioner Agency for Natural Resources and Energy. I would like to show my gratitude for this opportunity to speak today. I'd also like to apologize for the fact that Mr. Kajiyama, Minister of Economic Trade and Industry, was originally scheduled to speak here, but was unable to attend due to the circumstances of the diet. Since last year, in the face of the unprecedented crisis and the difficulties of COVID-19, the IEA Secretariat under the leadership of Dr. Birol has been working vigorously together to launch reports and hold various meetings. I'd like to once again express my high appreciation for the effort of the IEA. It's very important to utilize the knowledge of the IEA and International Energy Expert Organization in order to promote Japan's energy policy initiatives. Today, I would like to explain the current status and the future direction of Japan's energy policy based on the IEA's review. I'd also like to receive questions and feedback from all of you so that we can make further effort in the future. From now on, can I ask the interpreter? まず我が国におけるカーボンニュートラル
Now, first of all, the endeavors to try to achieve the carbon neutral in Japan. In October last year, Japan announced its intention to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. I believe that it is important to create the virtuous cycle between the economy and the environment, where proactive measures will bring about changes in the industrial structure and social economy and lead to the next big growth. The key to this virtuous cycle is innovation. Innovation in the energy and industrial sectors, which account for the majority of greenhouse gas emissions. It is particularly important. At the end of last year, Japan formulated the Green Growth Strategy, an action plan that includes supportive measures to promote social implementation in 14 important fields, including hydrogen batteries, offshore wind power, carbon recycling, and ammonia. In addition, in October last year, we began discussions to review the strategic energy plan, which sets the basic direction of our energy policy. In promoting energy policy, it is important to strike a balance among the four elements of the 3E+S: safety, energy security, economic efficiency, and environment. In our discussions for the review of the strategic energy plan, we will deepen our discussion based on this 3E+S perspective and the green growth strategy for achieving carbon neutrality. Let me Now explain the status of market reforms in the electricity and gas sectors based on the recommendation from the IEA. In Japan, the liberalization of electricity and gas retailing has been progressing step by step since the last in-depth review, and most recently following the unbundling of transmission and generation in the electricity sector in April 2020, the legal unbundling of the pipeline sector will be promoted for the three major gas companies in April 2022. In this way, the sector is undergoing a major transformation from a vertically integrated sector dominated by major utilities to a competitive sector that encourages new entrants, and we will continue to promote further reform of the electricity and gas markets as recommended by the IEA. In addition, I would like to explain the efforts to strengthen the power grid in the transmission and distribution. In Japan, while making efforts to make renewable energy the main power source, the stable supply of electricity is a major issue due to various reasons such as the lack of sufficient power transmission and distribution networks and the need to cope with frequent natural disasters. In recognition of these issues, the Government of Japan revised Electricity Business Act in June last year and will continue to implement measures such as the development of interconnection, transmission, and the construction of distributed power system, aiming to shift to a next-generation power network with drastically strengthened resilience while responding to the introduction of renewable energy. Through the above-mentioned efforts, as recommended by the IEA, we will aim to enhance transmission and distribution facilities to ensure energy security and to introduce a large amount of renewable energy. These are the current status and future direction of Japan's energy policy. As there is no single perfect energy source that satisfies all the 3E plus S criteria, we would like to aim for a diverse and multilinear approach that makes balanced use of various technologies and options rather than a uniform and single line approach in order to achieve carbon neutrality. In promoting these efforts, it is very important to utilize the knowledge of the IEA as a specialized energy agency. We will continue to work closely with the IEA under the leadership of Dr. Birol to steadily advance our efforts to achieve carbon neutrality. Once again, I would like to show my deepest gratitude towards the review team for their contributions, and we will continue to formulate better energy policy based on the recommendations from the IEA. I welcome any questions or feedback from all of you gathered here.
Many thanks for the presentation, Mr. Hosaka. It is now the time for our Q&A session. We will take a 2-minute break, and for the journalists who are on the Zoom, can I please ask you to send your questions in the Q&A box while we compile the questions. We will take a 2-minute break and be right back with you. Thank you. Questions I will address to Mr. Hosaka first. Sir, first question from Bern Radowitz from Recharge News. Japan's renewable energy target for 2030 is 23%. Why is it so low? Germany meets 50% of electricity needs with renewables despite exiting nuclear and coal. Do you think the Japanese government may increase its renewables target? And the second question, from Alex Forbes, what are the prospects for the kind of nuclear return required for Japan to meet its 2050 net zero target? What are the plans to phase out coal? Perhaps we could start with those questions, sir, before addressing the next round. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's with regard to 23% renewables number. Well, we have the photovoltaics and the wind energy. We intend to further reinforce these. Now, on the other hand, with regard to from 2012, with regard to photovoltaics, we've introduced the feed-in tariff system in order to spread this technology. It's just that in Japan, we have very limited plain land, flat land in Japan. We have only limited flat land, and we have a concentration of houses as residential areas as well as farmland concentrating the limited flat land. So there are some restrictions pertaining to land. In terms of the wind power generation, we are surrounded by very deep oceans. So technology-wise, so there are issues that are not yet resolved. So that is the reason why we are at this number. Now, we are working out the numbers for 2030. We are reviewing within the SCP Strategic Energy Plan the numbers. To what extent can we expand this number? Indeed, we are in the midst of such discussion as we speak. Now, turning to the outlook for nuclear energy. With regard to after the accident at Fukushima Daiichi plant, of the 50 plants, nuclear power plants, of the more than 20 have been decommissioned. Well, close to 20 are being decommissioned, and 36 units have the possibility of operating. But right now, only 9 of them have received permission to restart. Now, having said that, going forward, with regard to several plants, we're beginning to see visibility of possible resumption of those plants going forward. So as far as the goal is concerned, in 2030, 30 units, that is 30 units, 30 plants for 2030. We're not sure whether or not that is viable, but that is the thinking we have. And also, we are a country that are not, or where our grids are not connected to neighboring countries. So that being the case, we need diverse source of power. Against the backdrop, as far as coal is concerned, naturally, we want to reduce our dependence on coal as much as possible. So first, we want to phase out inefficient coal-fired power plant. We have announced phasing out of the inefficient coal-fired power plant. So in what manner can we shut down those plants? We are now having discussion with the utility industry. Thank you. That is all from my side.
Many thanks for your answer. We have another round of questions. I will take 3 questions, and in the interest of time, this will be the final round. The first question is for Mr. Hosaka, comes from Mikako Yokoyama from the Manishi newspaper. The IEA said in the report that Japan needs to accelerate the development of low carbon technology to reach net zero by 2050. Could you please provide a response or some elaboration on that, sir? And 2 questions for Dr. Birol. The question, maybe we'll take them in reverse order. Dr. Birol, can you elaborate on the plans for the IEA COP 26 Net Zero Summit? Can you say which countries are joining? This is a summit we are holding on March 31st. Which countries are joining and who will represent Japan at this event? Mr. Hosaka, please.
Now, in the strategic energy plan, we are looking for low carbon power generation for the future as we move towards the year 2050. Which technologies need to be utilized? We are now having discussion and debate on this. One potential is, of course, the wind power as well as solar PV. But in any case, batteries need to be developed to utilize these renewable energy. And naturally, for nuclear energy, because we need to utilize every the energy source possible, so we are trying to move towards restart of further units. As for the thermal power at plants, including coal and gas, to utilize the CCUS, the carbon capture, utilization, and the storage. We will be promoting research and development into this area. And furthermore, as was mentioned in the IEA report, for hydrogen and ammonia to be utilized for power generation, we are considering of this so that possibly such technologies could be utilized to bring to net zero of the carbon emission. Thank you.
Many thanks. And the question for Dr. Birol about the Net Zero Summit co-hosted by the IEA and COP26. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, on 31st of March, we are bringing about 50 governments represented at government leaders or ministerial level, as well as business leaders, thought leaders, civil society, in order to discuss how we can accelerate international collaboration to reach net zero targets. And this will, again, as I said, it will be chaired by the co-president, UK Minister Alok Sharma and myself, and it will be on 31st of March. And the idea is to provide a first good basis for the Glasgow summit, to build a bridge between March meeting and the Glasgow meeting. And I am very happy that in addition to the leaders, government leaders around the world and many ministers, I mentioned Secretary John Kerry from United States, Mr. Frank Timmermans from European Union, Vice President of European Union, several other leaders. We are honored to have the METI Minister, Mr. Kajiyama, will be a part of this summit. So we are very much looking forward to that, and I am sure Japan has a lot of to share with other governments based on the lots of great achievements that the Japanese government, Japanese economy, Japanese industry registered in the last few decades. And I'm sure Mr. Kajiyama will also share with us, with the other government leaders, Japan's thoughts for the next steps for the carbon neutrality by 2050. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Birol. And with that, I would like to conclude this session. Thank you very much. On behalf of the IEA, I would like to thank Mr. Hosaka for your attendance. Again, the findings of this report are online. We're getting still some questions, many questions and interest on this, and we will respond to you. If you have follow-up questions, please do email us at press@iea.org, and we will be following up. Thank you very much for your attendance.